You possess this anatomical structure that develops from the exact same embryonic tissue as the male prostate.
Yeah.
And it operates with such biochemical precision that it essentially functions as a microscopic, self-contained defense and irrigation system. But the wild part is this network is so well hidden that it's rarely discussed, at least not until the plumbing backs up.
Right, yeah. The female urogenital tract relies so heavily on these structures that we classify as basically microscopic heavy lifters. I mean, we are looking at a highly sensitive, localized ecosystem today. And the data from all these gynecological journals and clinical guidelines, it points to this intricate network managed primarily by two tiny sets of glands, the Skenes and the Bartholins glands.
Okay, let's unpack this. We are taking a deep dive today into the actual mechanics of female lubrication, how these specific glands regulate moisture, what happens when their delicate plumbing gets blocked, and the wider hormonal ecosystem that keeps everything functioning. So we're pulling from the Merck Manual, NHS guidelines, the Cleveland Clinic, a whole stack of literature. Let's start with the geography here.
Sure, geography is a great place to start.
Right, so down near the 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock positions around the vaginal opening, sitting deep under the skin, you have the Bartholin's glands. And they're tiny, right? Barely half a centimeter, like the size of a pea. They seem almost negligible.
They do, but their size is completely deceptive because their output is just so highly specialized. So during sexual arousal, these glands synthesize mucins.
Mucin?
Like mucus. Exactly. Well, they're these densely packed glycoproteins. And when these proteins are secreted and actually come into contact with water in the tissue, they uncoil and they expand massively. So that rapid expansion is what creates the viscous, lubricating mucus that coats the area.
Oh, wow. And they aren't just like sweating this fluid onto the surface either.
No, not at all.
Each gland is attached to a duct that's, about 2 centimeters long?
Roughly.
So it functions like a little micro pipeline, pushing that expanded mucin directly to the vaginal opening. And then slightly north of that, flanking the urethra, you have the Skenes glands, right? The paraurethral glands.
Right, which brings us back to that shared embryonic tissue you mentioned at the start. Because the Skenes glands are homologous to the male prostate, sometimes people even call it the female prostate.
Which is fascinating.
It is. Their secretions are incredibly chemically complex. So beyond just contributing to lubrication, immunological assays show their fluid contains proteins similar to PSA prostate-specific antigen, along with various antimicrobial peptides.
So they actually act as a localized chemical defense system.
They really do. I mean, their proximity to the urethra means these glands are strategically positioned to flesh out the urinary tract opening. They're creating an active barrier against ascending infections.
Reading through the clinical data for this deep dive, this whole network reminds me of like a highly specialized smart irrigation system.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, you have these localized deep tissue reservoirs making complex proteins, and they pump them through narrow pipelines precisely when the environment needs altering. It just usually works so perfectly in the background that you don't even know it's there until the sprinklers get jammed.
What's fascinating here is the sheer vulnerability of that architecture. I mean, you have a highly active gland pumping this thick, viscous fluid through a duct that is only a couple of millimeters wide.
Right.
So the physics of that system mean that even a minor disruption turns a standard biological process into a massive fluid dynamics problem.
Which totally explains why the clinical incidence of Bartholin cysts is surprisingly high. I think the literature said around 2 to 3% of women will experience an obstruction in these ducts in their lifetime.
Yeah, that's a very common presentation in gynecology.
But I have to ask a critical question here, because I'm sure you at home are wondering this too. Why did these blockages happen in the first place? Is it like a hygiene issue, or is it just random?
It's a great question, and it's definitely not a hygiene issue. For a simple cyst, the exact cause of the blockage is often just unknown. But on a cellular level, it's usually because the cells lining that narrow duct are constantly turning over. If that cellular debris doesn't clear properly, or if the fluid gets too thick from mild friction, a bottleneck forms.
And the gland has no idea the exit is blocked.
Exactly. It has no feedback loop. It just keeps producing fluid. So the trapped fluid expands the duct and the gland into a cyst, a simple fluid-filled sac. Now, this can get to the size of a golf ball, which makes the vulva look lopsided and causes pressure when you sit or walk, but it's often actually painless.
Wow, painless. But the literature makes a really strict distinction between that simple cyst and an abscess.
Huge difference, yes. The simple cyst is sterile. But if bacteria get into that blocked fluid, it becomes an incubator. The immune system rushes in, tissue swells, and it becomes a highly painful hot abscess filled with pus.
And the bacteria driving that are pretty surprising. While STIs like gonorrhea or chlamydia can cause the initial inflammation, most actual abscesses are caused by something else, right?
Yeah, Escherichia coli, E. coli is the most common culprit. Because of the anatomical proximity to the GI tract, E. coli migrates easily. It gets into that blocked duct, forms a biofilm, and makes it incredibly painful and hard to treat.
And we also see the Skenes glands suffering from similar blockages, even though it's rarer.
Right, and because they sit right next to the urethra, a cyst there doesn't even need to be big to cause problems. It can restrict urine flow, causing a hesitant start when you try to pee. And since they make those antimicrobial peptides, a blockage means you lose that defense, leading to recurrent UTIs.
So if you're dealing with this backed up plumbing, how do doctors actually fix it? Because the treatments range from like warm baths to some pretty intense surgical engineering.
Well, for mild, painless cysts, the watch and wait approach with warm sitz baths is often enough. The heat increases blood flow and can sometimes help the duct open on its own.
But if it's an abscess or a really stubborn cyst, you need surgery. And my first thought was, oh, they just lance it and drain it.
Right, which seems logical.
But the sources say that's actually a terrible long-term solution.
It really is. The tissue there is designed to heal super fast. If you just drain it, it seals right back shut in a few days. You haven't fixed the duct, so it just refills.
Okay, so they have to force the body to build a new drainage pathway. And they use something called a word catheter.
Yes, it's an ingenious little device. After they drain it, doctors insert this tiny silicone tube with a balloon at the end directly into the cyst cavity. They inflate the balloon so it stays put and leave it there for 4 to 6 weeks.
4 to 6 weeks. That sounds incredibly uncomfortable, but I get why.
Right. It physically forces the skin cells to grow down and line the new opening, creating a permanent tract that won't heal shut.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. If the catheter doesn't work, they move to something called marsupialization.
Marsupialization, yes. It's quite the procedure.
They literally make an incision, clear the cyst, and then structurally convert it from a closed bubble into a permanently open pocket. They peel the inside edges outward and stitch them directly to the outside skin.
Exactly. It permanently integrates the gland into the surface tissue to keep it draining. It's highly effective. But there is a major clinical caveat we need to mention, and it depends entirely on age.
Right, because most of these happen in women in their 20s and 30s when the glands are super active.
Yes, but after menopause, without estrogen, these glands naturally undergo involution. They shrink and shut down. So, if a woman over 40 suddenly develops a new Bartholin cyst or mass,
The doctors get much more concerned.
extremely, because a new mass in a shrunken gland is suspicious. In those cases, they usually skip the catheter and do a biopsy or completely excise the gland to rule out Bartholin gland cancer, which is incredibly rare, but you have to check.
Mentioning the gland shrinking after menopause brings us perfectly to the macro level of this whole system, because these glands don't work in a vacuum.
No, not at all.
The entire lubrication network relies on a bigger ecosystem.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, this entire local ecosystem is powered and regulated by estrogen. Estrogen keeps the vaginal walls thick, highly elastic, and rich in glycogen.
Glycogen being the food for the good bacteria.
Exactly. The healthy lactobacilli bacteria eat that glycogen and produce lactic acid. That is what keeps the vaginal pH strictly acidic, right between 3.5 and 5.0. It's an acidic shield that stops infections.
So when that estrogen drops, whether that's from natural menopause or like breastfeeding or even certain cancer treatments, the whole system basically crashes. It's called genitourinary syndrome of menopause, or GSM.
And it happens quite rapidly. The walls thin out, the healthy bacteria die, the pH goes up, and the glands just stop secreting moisture. It causes severe dryness, really painful sex, and a huge spike in infection risk.
Which sounds miserable. But there was a detail in the clinical guidelines that I think you listeners will find super practical, because people use the words lubricant and moisturizer interchangeably all the time.
Constantly. But medically, they are very different tools.
Could you clarify that for us?
Yeah.
Because I think the distinction is huge.
Of course. So lubricants, your water or silicone-based gels, are just for sexual activity. They just sit on the surface to reduce friction. They don't change the tissue at all.
But a moisturizer does.
Yes. Vaginal moisturizers, which you use regularly, like 2 or 3 times a week, contain things like hyaluronic acid. They actually pull water into the mucosal cells. They physically alter the tissue, plump it back up, and help lower the pH, even if you aren't having sex.
Okay, that makes so much sense. But for advanced GSM, sometimes that's not even enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
You actually have to treat it with localized hormones.
Right. And people get scared of hormone therapy because they think of the systemic pills or patches that flood the whole bloodstream. But for this, we use localized vaginal estrogen creams, rings, little tablets.
So it just acts right there in the tissue.
Exactly. It reboots the local ecosystem, thickens the tissue, and brings back the moisture without raising estrogen levels in the rest of your body. We're even seeing amazing results with localized DHEA.
Oh yeah, DHEA. Because the cells basically take that inactive precursor and turn it into active estrogen right inside the cell, right?
Right. It's called endocrinology. The hormone never even spills into the bloodstream. It's incredibly precise.
So what does this all mean? We started by talking about two tiny sets of glands, but we've uncovered this highly sensitive, estrogen-driven ecosystem. It relies on microscopic plumbing, precise biochemical reactions, and delicate hormonal balance just to function pain-free. It's so much more complex than people realize.
It really is. And I think there's a really provocative thought we can pull from all this.
Oh, definitely. What are you thinking?
Well, think back to the Skenes glands. We know they are essentially the female prostate. They originate from the exact same embryonic tissue as the male prostate.
Right.
So if male and female anatomies are far more similar at their developmental roots than we typically acknowledge, we really have to ask ourselves, what are we missing in medical research by keeping urology and gynecology so rigidly separated by gender?
Oh, wow. That's a great point.
Right. If we broke down that strict gender binary in medical research, who knows what breakthrough treatments for urological health we might find that could benefit everyone.
That is exactly why we do these deep dives. It is just a stark reminder that human biology is so interconnected, and there's always more beneath the surface. Thank you all for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the amazing hidden mechanics of the human body. We'll catch you next time.